Have you ever listened to a podcast, read the parenting book, prayed about the situation, and still found yourself reacting the same exact way? You know what you want to do, you know how you want to show up, but when the moment comes, everything you've learned feels impossible to actually access. Why is that? Today, I want to talk to you about why information alone doesn't create transformation, what coaching actually is, and why one good question can change far more than another piece of advice ever could. Mama, are you tired of meltdowns stealing the peace in your home? Welcome to Parenting Beyond Meltdowns. I'm Amanda, a Christian life coach and a mom of a strong-willed neurospicy teen. If you've tried everything from consequences, parenting books, crying out to the Father, and still feel like you're failing, you're not alone. Inside this podcast, we'll explore how faith, emotional regulation, and connection work together so that you can parent from a place of peace, even in the hardest moments. You don't have to hold it all together here. This is a safe space to lay it all down. Welcome. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to make sure that you know that if you missed our recent summer workshop, it's not too late to watch the replay. Over the last several weeks here on the podcast, we've been talking about our thoughts, our emotions, and learning to respond instead of react. In the workshop, I bring all of those pieces together and walk you through the anchored mama approach and 6 simple anchors that can help you move from survival mode towards greater peace and connection with your child. If you've been listening to this series and thinking, I want to know what it looks like in real life, I think you'll really enjoy the workshop. You can watch the replay by visiting amandacalfee.com/replay. That's amandacalfee.com/replay, or by clicking the link in the show notes. Now let's jump into today's conversation. One of my favorite parts of this week's workshop happened after the teaching was over. A couple of mamas stayed afterward, and I had the privilege of coaching them. As I reflected on those conversations later that evening, I noticed something. Neither one of them needed parenting advice. They didn't come looking for a behavior chart. They didn't need another strategy. They certainly didn't need someone telling them that what they were doing was wrong. What they needed was someone to slow everything down, someone to help them notice what was happening beneath the surface. And honestly, the Father reminded me of something in my own life too. One of my natural tendencies has always been wanting to help mamas by giving them the answers. I love encouraging mamas. I love teaching. I love sharing what I've learned. But I'm realizing something. Transformation doesn't usually happen because someone gives you a perfect answer. It often begins with one thoughtful question. A question that slows us down long enough to notice what we've been believing all along. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that's true in parenting too. When our child is struggling, our first instinct is often to explain, correct, lecture, convince, fix, when sometimes what they're really needing is someone who's willing to slow down and become curious. And that's exactly what coaching has taught me, not just as a coach, but as a mama. Our first point today is information isn't the same as transformation. Over the last several weeks, we've talked about our thoughts, our emotions, and our reactions, and learning to process what's happening beneath the surface. Many of you have probably been listening and thinking, that makes so much sense, but when real life happens, your child has another meltdown, your teenager rolls their eyes, someone says something hurtful, you're exhausted, and suddenly the things you know feel difficult to live out. Why? Because information isn't the same as transformation. Knowing something and practicing something are two very different things. I knew for years that yelling wasn't helping. I knew that control wasn't creating connection. I knew that I wanted to respond differently. Knowing wasn't the problem. Living it was. And I think so many mamas find themselves there wondering, if I already know these things, why do I keep reacting? It's because change really happens simply by collecting more information. It happens when we begin to slow down enough to understand what's happening inside of us. Point number 2, good coaching asks better questions. One of the biggest differences between listening to a podcast and sitting down with a coach is that a podcast can teach, but it can't hear your answer. I can ask what thought is running through your mind right now, but I can't hear what comes up for you while you're driving in your car. I can encourage you to process your emotions, but I don't know which emotion keeps showing up for you. Coaching creates space for your story. Instead of immediately asking, "What should I do?" we begin asking different questions. What's the thought playing in the background? What emotion is driving this reaction? What am I making this situation mean about me or my child? Where do I feel this in my body? Who do I want to be in this moment? Those questions begin uncovering things that we often don't see on our own. Not because we're incapable, but because it's difficult to see the whole picture when we're standing inside the frame. Sometimes we simply need someone outside of our story to help us notice what we've been unable to notice ourselves. Point 3, coaching isn't about giving answers. I think one of the biggest misconceptions about coaching is that you're paying someone to tell you what to do. That's actually one of the least interesting parts of coaching. If all you needed was more information, you probably wouldn't still be listening to this podcast because you've read the books, you've listened to experts, you've prayed, you've tried different approaches. You're not lacking for information. What many of us are lacking is a safe place to slow everything down, a place where someone is willing to become curious with us, not to judge us, not to fix us, not to tell us that we're failing, but to help us understand what's actually happening beneath the reaction. Because once we understand what's happening, we can begin choosing differently. Not overnight, not perfectly, but intentionally. Point number 4, transformation happens through practice. One of the reasons that I love coaching so much is because transformation doesn't usually happen from one conversation. It happens when you begin to practice a different way of thinking, a different way of processing your emotions, and a different way of showing up in your everyday life. That's what I get to watch as I walk alongside mamas that I coach. We have a conversation, they leave with greater awareness, and then they go home and they practice. They notice the old thought showing up, they pause, they process instead of reacting. They begin asking themselves the same questions we've been practicing together. Sometimes they respond differently, sometimes they don't. And then we come back together and we celebrate what went well and we become curious about what didn't. We uncover another layer, and little by little, those intentional moments of practice begin creating lasting transformation. Not because they're trying harder, not because they're learning to think differently. They're learning to process differently. They're learning to respond differently. And over time, that changes the way they experience parenting. It changes the way they experience themselves. It changes the way that they experience their relationship with their child. And that's the beauty of coaching. It's not about having one great conversation. It's about walking together. It's about walking together as those new ways of thinking become new ways of living. Something that one of my clients noticed in our last session was that normally I ask on your reflection form, what are the top 3 emotions that you felt this week? And she usually commented frustration as her number 1 emotion. And we noticed something this last session that was her last emotion of the 3. Her first 2 were love and joy, and the third was frustration. And we counted that as a win and celebrated that because that shows growth. One verse that keeps coming up for me is Proverbs 20:5. The purposes of a person's heart are deep waters, but the one who has insight draws them out. I love that picture. Sometimes what's happening inside our hearts feels deep, hidden, hard to put into words, and one thoughtful question asked with compassion can begin drawing those things to the surface, not so we can live in them, but so we can invite the Father into them, because He isn't interested in simply changing our behavior. He wants to transform us from the inside out. This week, I want you to notice how quickly your mind looks for answers. When something hard happens, pause. Instead of immediately asking, what do I need to do? Try asking, what do I need to understand? What thought is underneath this? What emotion is asking for my attention? What story am I believing right now? And then sit with it. You don't have to solve it immediately. Sometimes one good question is the beginning of real transformation. Mama, if today's episode resonated with you and you're realizing that what you need isn't more information, but a place to actually practice what you're learning, I'd love to invite you to take the next step. Right now, I'm offering a 4-session Anchored Mama coaching package designed to help you move beyond simply understanding these concepts and begin living them out in your everyday life. Together, we'll slow down the hard moments, uncover what's happening beneath the surface, and help you begin asking different questions so you can respond with greater peace, confidence, and connection with your child. If you've been thinking, I know what to do, I just need someone to walk alongside me as I learn how to do it, that's exactly what these coaching sessions are designed for. And because you've been listening during this workshop week, if you enroll by Sunday night, I'll also include anchor support between our sessions at no additional cost. That means when real life happens between coaching calls, you won't have to wait until your next session. You'll have a place to celebrate wins, ask questions, receive encouragement, and continue practicing what you've been learning as you begin building new patterns. You'll also receive your Anchored Companion Guide and Grounded in Grace devotional to help you continue practicing what we're working on together between sessions. You can learn more or book your coaching package at amandacalfee.com/experience. That's AMANDACALFEE.com/EXPERIENCE. You can also find the link in today's show notes. I would love the opportunity to walk alongside you as you begin rebuilding connection with your child and becoming the anchored mama the Father created you to be. Hey, sweet mama, I hope you loved today's episode. Can you do me a favor? If this episode spoke to your heart, would you take 30 seconds and share it with a mama in your life who needs to know they are not alone? Also, would you leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts for me? It blesses my heart to know that this show is giving you hope in hard moments. All right, I'm off to grab some protein because love and grace flows easier when you're not just running on fumes and coffee. I'll meet you back here next week for another honest and hope-filled conversation. In the meantime, mama, stay rooted in faith and anchored in love.